Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Concussion Nerds podcast. And welcome to 2025. This is the official first podcast drop of the new year. And I am so excited to be back with you. I'm excited about what we have planned for this year. I'm excited about what's coming up in the next few months. Lots of amazing things. So, welcome. But today's episode, we're just going to dive right in a little bit. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between nervous system dysregulation and dysautonomia. They are not the same thing. And I think that social media is doing a little bit of a disservice for us right now because I see the ads, right? I see the posts because both of these topics near and dear to me. I believe in both of them. I think nervous system regulation is something that every single one of us should be practicing. And I think it is a big problem that as a society as a whole, we are very dysregulated. But that doesn't mean we have dysautonomia. And unfortunately, right now, what we're seeing on social media a lot is this is a really big area. This is being brought up over and over again. There's lots of courses being taught on it right now. There's lots of education being taught on it right now. Heck, I have a free workbook on how you reconnect with your nervous system to help with nervous system dysregulation, right? We'll drop that link in the show notes below if you want to grab that and you don't have that yet, right? This is a topic that I care about. The funny thing is, we were scrolling back. The first reel, so it's blowing up on social right now, right? Everywhere you turn, get this nervous system dysregulation course. It's not IBS, it's nervous system dysregulation. Everything was fixed when I learned how to regulate my nervous system. And this is the problem with the messaging that's out there right now. So that's what we're going to get into. But the very first post I ever dropped about learning how to regulate your nervous system and the importance of nervous system regulation was like 3.5 or 4 years ago now. Isn't that crazy? It was a reel. I found it. I went scrolling back through my Instagram and oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff on that Instagram account. I went scrolling back through my Instagram. The first reel I ever posted on nervous system dysregulation, learning how to regulate and get in tune with your nervous system was literally 3.5 or 4 years ago at this point. But it's all over the place right now. And again, I think it's an important topic. But we have to recognize, especially in this space of concussion, that nervous system dysregulation is not the same thing as dysautonomia. And this also became really important as something that we needed to talk about when one of my clients, who was now working with a different therapist because the location staff, she had dysautonomia for sure. Secondary to her concussion, definitely dealt with dysautonomia. We are going to talk about the difference between the two, I promise, my friends. And we worked really hard and that normalized, right? It's doing fantastic. The symptoms aren't there anymore. She's doing great. But she still deals with, like everybody, some nervous system dysregulation. And so when the new therapist did an assessment and the kind of feedback was like, well, your autonomic nervous system is actually pretty good. There was this moment, I think, for my client of, but my nervous system is still a challenge. And we had to have that discussion of, from a dysautonomia perspective and the POTS symptoms perspective and the orthostatic intolerance perspective, that is good. She's not saying that nervous system regulation isn't something we're still working on. So this is where it was this big piece of, okay, we need to break this down a bit and we need to talk about them both because they're not the same thing. And if you have dysautonomia, just doing the tools we use for dysregulation, it's going to help because with dysautonomia, you likely have dysregulation as well. And we'll talk about why, but you need to be doing more. So what is nervous system dysregulation? And when I think about this, I think so much of the population today lives in a dysregulated state or has challenges with regulating their nervous system, right? And this is why. So nervous system dysregulation is ultimately a state where the nervous system struggles to maintain balance. I'm going to say to appropriately shift between the different components of the nervous system, right? So within our nervous system, we have our parasympathetic. If you are in polyvagal, that would be our ventral vagal system, right? Our safe, right? Rest and digest system. Then we have our sympathetic nervous system. This is our fight or flight. This is our mobilization, right? Sympathetic. Then we have freeze, shut down, immobilization, which if again in polyvagal world would be dorsal vagal, right? So we have these three different states of our nervous system. All of them serve a purpose. Not a single state is a bad thing. We need all three. The challenge and what happens when you get dysregulated or when you're really struggling with nervous system regulation challenges is that your nervous system loses the ability to dynamically shift appropriately between these different states, right? We shouldn't be stuck in sympathetic all the time. The research shows is going to have health implications. Yes, it will. We shouldn't be stuck in dorsal vagal all the time or immobilization all the time. That's the equivalent of depression, right? That too will lead to chronic health issues. The research shows that when someone lives in a chronic state of stress or if it lives in that sympathetic dominant state, that absolutely shows up in outcome measures like your heart rate variability. And we know that people with prolonged and chronic lower heart rate variabilities is representative of a more sympathetically dominant system, which affects cognition, which affects health conditions down the road, which affects premature death. We know these things. Yes, this matters. We also can't live in parasympathetic rest and digest all the time either. It's not going to serve us, right? So what we're seeing on social media all the time right now, a lot, or what perpetuates my feed is that, A, we need to be in rest and digest, and we need to be in sympathetic or parasympathetic, and we need to be here. Yes. And we need to be able to appropriately move into sympathetic. We need to be able to appropriately move in to and out of dorsal vagal when the situation calls for it. Example, exercise. Exercise stimulates your sympathetic nervous system. That's what shifts the blood flow from the digestion to the bigger muscles so you can have the energy to run, to sprint, to play. Right? Now, here's the difference. Things like exercise, things like sex, things like laughter and running and playing with friends, these things like very specific forms of breath work, these are things that intentionally push you into a sympathetic state. Cold plunging, right? Cold plunging in that initial, like going in the water and cold plunge is a sympathetic activation. You are intentionally going into a sympathetic state. And then you allow yourself recovery, right? So when we intentionally move into challenge and then recover, that is what starts to increase our capacity, our resilience. That's training your nervous system, right? So nervous system dysregulation can happen to all of us. And so many people are living in a dysregulated state, which means they're living in a state of chronic sympathetic activation or chronic shutdown. So what causes this, right? What can push somebody into a chronic state of sympathetic or dorsal vagal activation? Well, friends, that can be things like stress. Chronic stress? Absolutely. Trauma. Trauma is a big one, right? Overwhelming environments and constantly being in those overwhelming environments, right? Like constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and having burnout, stress, all these factors 100% will lead to and can lead to nervous system dysregulation. And this is where I think we started to see some of this shift from a massive hustle culture. Unfortunately, we then swung the pendulum, I think, the entire opposite way, where it's like, you don't need to work hard. We need to have some middle ground. Okay, we need to have some middle ground. But that never letting yourself rest, never shutting off, always having deadlines, always having to produce the next thing, always having to have that next step forward, always having to be the best mom, always having to have the best kids, always having to be in the best shape. Those stressors chronically over time layer on top of potentially a traumatic experience or several traumatic experiences or whatever leads to chronic stress. Because I don't know about you, but I was never taught about tools to help regulate my nervous system. That didn't exist, right? I was the girl who was the overthinker. I was the people pleaser. I was the woke up with anxiety in my stomach and felt like I was going to vomit. That was me, right? I've shared the story that really 2021 as the year kind of all came to a head, right? 2020 was when I could no longer shove one of my major traumatic events of my life down. And I was having those intrusive thoughts regularly. I was having nightmares, right? I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly emotionally taxed, right? And that led to brain fog. That led to short-term memory issues. That led to all these pieces. That led to anxieties, all the things. That's what drove me to finally start to do therapy and things like EMDR, right? No one taught me about nervous system stuff. And then there was the days, and then there was the time frame where that started to resolve, which was phenomenal. There's a new word for you guys, phenomenal. But I was waking up every single day feeling like I was going to vomit. Every day. I would open my eyes, I would put my feet on the ground, and I would feel like I was going to hurl. Physically, I was lethargic, I was tired. For me, that was very much, I was living in a chronic sympathetic state. And it was me feeling like that in that kind of not enjoyable place whatsoever that started to lead me down the path of nervous system regulation and what that actually meant and putting practices in play. This is why I preach so much about the importance of morning routines and finding space for yourself. And it started to lead me down this path. And it's how I reconnected with my nervous system and can now understand the cues of my body and my brain and my nervous system. And I have a huge toolbox of things to help me when I recognize these things coming up so that I don't spiral, for example, from anxiety. And it's this that led me to writing my workbook, which again, link below, to help people like you and anybody. Because again, when I talk about nervous system dysregulation, it is incredibly powerful. And yes, when you have a life of chronic stress or burnout, or there's a lot of emotional things happening in your world right now, or there's other environmental things happening, aka concussion and all the stress that goes with that, right? If there's just layers of stress in your life, then yes, you need to, not even I'm going to say you might want to, you need to have practices that help support nervous system regulation. And this is truly where the things like breath work, meditation, yoga, lifestyle practices, honestly, how you communicate, how you set boundaries for yourself, journaling, activity, exercise, who you surround yourself with. You know, if trauma is a piece that's contributing to why you're in this chronic state, therapy, right? I love seeing that the stigma around therapy is decreasing today. I know it's still there. But I love seeing that people are openly talking about the benefit of therapy, whether that be EMDR, which was for me godsend, whether that be somatic experiences, whatever that is you need for you, right? The goal with these types of interventions, with these types of, I'm going to say practices, because I think for me, these should be regular practices in your life. And There's going to be times when you need to use them more than others. This isn't a do it once and you're good for the rest of your life thing. Absolutely not. This is a balance your tools, your routines, and your habits around what the demand is on you and your system and your body. That is so important. So there's going to be times where you feel like you don't need to meditate every day. Honestly, I would recommend doing at least a 4-minute meditation every day. But we're all human, and I'm not going to lie, that doesn't always happen in my world either. There's going to be times where you don't need to see therapy every week. There's going to be times where you don't need to do all the things all the time. And then there's going to be times where you need to step up the level of tools and practices that you're doing, because ideally you are in tune with your body and you are recognizing some of the symptoms and some of the signs of dysregulation, right? That can be anything from sleep starts to get disrupted, feeling super restless, being irritable, lethargic, your self-talk or your body image starts to go down the drain. You start making less nutritious food choices, right? There's so many different things. Again, grab the workbook if you don't have it. It's free. But there's so many different ways that this can start to show up in our bodies. The key is you understanding in your body how dysregulation starts to show up in you. Okay. So dysregulation, it's our nervous system's inability to appropriately dynamically shift between the state of nervous system that is demanded in that moment. That is my definition of what we're looking at with nervous system regulation. Okay. It is not the same as dysautonomia. Hard stop. Do people with dysautonomia also have dysregulation? Yes. It's not the same thing. Dysautonomia is a medical condition that refers to the dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions like heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, temperature regulation. It typically has underlying physiological reasons as to why it is present. Okay, so here's some common causes or some common reasons why someone might have dysautonomia. They might have autoimmune disorders, right? So certain types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome have dysautonomia linked in with it. Lupus can have dysautonomia with it. Sjogren's syndrome, all of those autoimmune disorders have a component of dysautonomia with them. Viral infections, long COVID, right? We started seeing a lot of dysautonomia after COVID. So long COVID can lead to dysautonomia. Neurological disorders, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, right? Genetic predispositions or trauma, aka like a concussion, can lead to dysautonomia. Dysautonomia is an umbrella term, right? So it is a big term, an umbrella term that, again, a lot of different things fit underneath it. But again, it is a medical condition that refers to the dysfunction of the nervous system, which controls those things like heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, temperature regulation, etc. Right? So what comes in a lot here and what people think about a lot here is POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, right? That is a form of dysautonomia. Not all dysautonomia is POTS, right? So what are some of the symptoms that we might have with dysautonomia, especially when we look at things like heart rates and blood pressures and all these things that are affected, right? Orthostatic intolerance. So that is just the concept of when you shift your position against gravity. So when you go from sitting to standing or lying to sitting or lying to standing, that you feel faint or you feel dizzy. And that's because something within the nervous system isn't able to trigger the reflex that's required to normalize your blood pressure when you have that challenge against gravity. Okay. Rapid heart rate. So POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, is characterized by an increase in or a sustained rapid heart rate with those postural changes, again, against gravity. Blood pressure fluctuations. Yes, gastrointestinal issues, temperature dysregulation issues, right? In concussion, a lot we hear people who struggle with temperature regulation, and then you also hear physicians tell them that that can't be related to their concussion. It absolutely can be. Okay. That chronic fatigue, all these pieces, those are some symptoms, like a minimal list of symptoms. Here's the really important piece. Dysautonomia has an underlying reason physiologically, typically, as to why it's existing. There's something within the nervous system, whether it's a reflex, whether it's a pathway, something that is dysfunctional that's not generating the appropriate response to that demand or that challenge. That requires rehab. So when someone has dysautonomia, I always say you need both tools to manage and to treat. And when I'm talking about manage, I am talking about the things we would use for twofold. So the things that we would use for dysregulation of our nervous system, because let's be real for a second here. Having dysautonomia, not fully understanding what's in your body, what's happening in your body, going through this process of concussion recovery, going through everything that goes with that is a stressor. And stressors and chronic stress can lead to dysregulation. So it would only make sense that if you're someone that also has dysautonomia, that you will have and practice tools to support your nervous system as best we can. Right? So you should have those practices of nervous system support to help it regulate as best it can. Right? So the same things with the meditation, with the breath work, with the nutrition, with the exercise as you can based on the dysautonomia impacts, right? So there's some caveats here. Yes, we need those things. Secondly, depending on what or how your specific form of dysautonomia is showing up, if it is with blood pressure, example, like orthostatic intolerance or things like that, then from a management perspective, we might want to use things like compression garments. We might want to increase hydration or salt to increase hydration because it's bypassing the reflex that's not working, right? We are going to need those things. We want to talk about pacing. Those are management pieces. The other piece is now figuring out, well, what's actually not working physiologically within our systems, and can we rehab it to improve this situation for you? Because if we don't do that piece, you're going to be managing for the rest of your life. And if you're doing all the nervous system regulation stuff and all these other pieces and it's fine, I always say, someone's always like, how long do I need to rehab for? And it's like, you go to a point where you feel like where you're satisfied with your quality of life, where you're happy with your quality of life. He had a client. He was a concussion client. He was 17 years old, 17 or 18 years old, high-level hockey player. Had been diagnosed with POTS when he was 15. He absolutely, exercise was huge. He has his tools and his quality of life reached a point where he's like, I'm good. He plays high-level hockey with POTS, but he knows what he needs to do. And he gets through his days, right? So the key when we're looking at dysautonomia is that, yes, we still want these management strategies. Yes, we still want to be doing things like for nervous system regulation, and you want to connect with somebody who understands how to look at those different components of the nervous system to see what's actually not working and what is dysfunctional. And can we help you rehab that piece to help you move forward in your life? And from my own practice and from my colleagues' practices, I can tell you that that is possible. Is it easy? No. Does it take work? 100%. Are some days might you feel like giving up? Yeah, pretty sure you will. But this is where consistency and showing up for yourself every single day pays off. So, summarizing note, nervous system dysregulation is not dysautonomia. Nervous system regulation, dysregulated nervous system, absolutely crucially important in every single one of our lives. Being in a chronic stressed, chronic sympathetic state for years on end or shut down 100% will affect your quality of life and affect your health. Zero question. There are 100% tools you can use and implement in your daily routines to shift that for the better. Now, if you don't know what those tools are, connecting with someone who this is an area where they do the work, do that. Get some guidance so that you don't have to figure it out on your own, because there's many of us that do practice this in this area and coach on it, that you shouldn't have to figure it out alone if it's an area you're struggling with. Okay? Dysautonomia is a medical condition referring to that dysfunction of the nervous system that affects involuntary controls like your heart rate, your blood pressure, your digestion, your temperature regulation, and it has an underlying physical or physiological reason why it's happening. Okay? Dysautonomia, while that person will also benefit from the tools of dysregulation, requires intervention and rehab so that we can try to figure out what that piece is that isn't working and help you rehab it to a better state. All right. That is my tangent for today. I hope you're all having a phenomenal day. Again, if you've listened to the end, thank you for being here. Free nervous system workbook below. Grab it. If you are a therapist and you are interested in working with complex concussion, but you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and you would like a framework to systematically work through the process to make change better while feeling confident in working with your clients, join my Rethink Rehab Workshop. We have special opportunity pricing between now and January 23rd, and then that price will disappear forever. So, wishing you all a phenomenal day, and we will see you soon. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.